I'm sure everyone has heard of the Defense Department's ultimatum to Anthropic yesterday. That's not what we're talking about today, but it does bring to the forefront the reliability and trust issues that are key concerns with AI everywhere. And they're perhaps especially key concerns in the finance function, given reliability and compliance issues. So we have some wonderful panelists here today who can talk about those issues and more, tell us what AI is doing, and hopefully help us try to understand where it's going. So let me introduce the panelists first, and then we'll get started with the discussion. So to my left, we have Andrew Moore, who's the CFO of Prime Communications. Prime Communications is the largest North American authorized retailer for AT&T. They've got over 2,000 stores and 7,500 employees. Next to Andrew, we have Marie Myers, who is Executive Vice President and CFO of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. HPE is at the forefront of the AI infrastructure build-out, from $7 billion in AI server orders last year to HPE Private Cloud to the $14 billion acquisition of Juniper Networks. And then on my far left, as Michael said, we have Admiral Douglas Fears, retired Rear Admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard, former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to the President, and Director of the National Security Council's Cybersecurity Director. Currently, Douglas Admiral Fears is at Artis International, where he's Chief Operating Officer and Chief Operating Officer of the Applied AI arm, Magi. So, Andrew, let me start with you. So before joining Prime, you spent nearly a decade in audit, so you bring a strong controller's mind to the finance function. With the volume of transactions that you have in Prime, that reliability and compliance must be key concerns. Can you tell us what you've done with AI at Prime and what you're doing and what you hope to do?
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I kind of bucket AI into kind of three things, like productivity, insight, and control with my background, right? And so, I would say Prime, we're relatively, a young company still, we're still learning. So I'd say we're early in the frontier of AI, right? I'd say the past 2 years, we've been focused on automation integration using like Power Apps, Power Automate to eliminate the manual processes, and kind of streamline functions and productivity. Right now we're just stepping into the world of AI frontier. And that's probably where a lot of companies are sitting right now. We're trying to figure out, hey, do we dive all in, or do we just, get our knees wet and kind of just progress in, right? And so our enterprise approach, we've done a decentralized and a centralized approach, right? So when I talk about decentralized, we've bought, an enterprise license for all the employees of our company in the service center. And so, hey, we're giving you access to it. Use it in your daily productivity. Hey, can you make things faster? Can you analyze large data? Can you draft the email? Can you respond to the email, right? So stuff that is focused on productivity, right? So if we help our 2,000 stores or our 7,500 employees just increase their productivity, the scale and the bottom line increases vastly there, right? And then on the centralized approach, we are building agents on specific data sets, right? And a good example on this is, we have thousands and thousands of customers coming in daily, right? And so this agent is grabbing CSAT scores, customer satisfaction scores, right? And Google reviews, right? So it's combing all that. This would have been a manual job probably 4 months ago. Now it's combing all this. It's looking at trends. It's identifying, hey, are there hot pockets where maybe some of our employees are not treating customers well? And even vice versa, right? So it's looking at those things that we would have taken, probably months to identify, and now we're finding it faster, right? And so those are the agents. So we're kind of identifying specific data sets and building those agents, right? Now, in the finance, with my background, maybe I'm a little harder to crack the controls and just letting it go wild. I think that's just my 12 years in auditing. But in finance, I think we're just looking at hey, how can we use AI to just increase productivity? I got a 100-page report. How do I drop it in and help me summarize and come to a conclusion, right? How do I review large data that would have taken weeks to analyze, and now I have something in 30 minutes? I think that's where we are. I haven't, I guess we as a company haven't opened up AI and allowed it into all the finances and, to make decisions, stuff like that. I'm very, very hesitant to do that. And so I think that's where we sit. And I think, it's going to be something that it's going to take a little bit of time. I know one of the persons said, hey, speed. And I'm like, well, I'm a little cautious on speed because I don't want to drop the ball, right? I don't want to make a decision because we are customer facing. We're a customer, we are part of AT&T. We have sensitive information, and I just don't want to jump the gun on that and allow something sneak out and we just didn't catch it, right? So I think that's kind of how we are sitting right now at the forefront, just testing the waters. I think we're seeing great productivity in specific areas, and then it's just going to continue.
Thank you, Andrew. Marie, before you joined HPE, you were CFO of UiPath, which led the way in automation. So you've seen automation from several vantage points. And I know you've spoken publicly about building an AI platform at HPE that you call Alfred. So could you tell us about what you've built at HPE and the finance function and where you see that going?
Sure. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. As you said, I've had a background in automation and sort of early days of AI for almost a decade now. I was one of the early adopters in the United States of RPA enterprise automation. And I sort of learned through that window. I was a controller as well and an auditor myself for many years, so I am a bit of a control freak. But what I liked about automation and why I gravitated there so quickly was there was just so much mundane manual work in finance. And I've been in finance for decades. And my first job out of graduate school, and my professor, I'll give her a call out, is in the audience today, who taught me 30 years ago. She might remember my first job, I was a spreadsheet queen. I was a jockey. I used to build amazing pivot tables, and I'd be up all night downloading data, building tables. And I got to tell you, 3 decades later, I don't think it was a great use of 3 university degrees. So I was really excited. Sorry to say that to all the graduates here, but I was excited when RPA came along because I saw it as a way to take that mundane layer out of work, because I was dumping data and sort of doing what I think the machine and frankly the bots could do. So when AI started to come along, I saw it as a fairly similar, obviously a much more powerful wave of what I'd experienced with RPA. So I leaned in very heavily. And in fact, I've spent the last year with my team building a platform that we call Alfred, which is actually Batman's wingman, to actually help us really run a critical process in finance, which is our operations. We have a call once a week. It's really where all the executives come together in the company at lunchtime on Mondays. It's about 100 pages of PowerPoint. And the finance team spends pretty much 5 days, including the weekend, building the story about the company's performance. And it's a look back. You get to this meeting, everybody's got a story to tell. All the general managers cycle through and kind of give you their view on where the company is operating. As a CFO, first of all, I don't like the fact there's 100 pages. Secondly, my team has spent days, hours, 100 of my staff are involved. They've spent the weekend just pulling together static data that's backward looking. Thirdly, the general managers tend to focus on the things they want to focus on versus what myself and my boss might think is actually really important. So we intentionally in my team spent a year trying to take a large language model and really customize it, build a bespoke application to run an operations call. And we're ready to go live, which I'm pleased to announce. And it's going to basically take away and eliminate all the PowerPoint, all the backwards looking conversations, and all the work. We've actually put it in an AI enabled way. So the UI is AI, and we will sort of run a memo, which the AI produces before the call to help guide the executives to the conversation. So one, super excited about the fact that my staff have better things to do. Two, we're going to talk about the stuff that actually really matters, not the stuff that the general manager wants me to gloss over, about the data. And I'm a big believer in data-led stories. And third, it's a great way to evangelize AI as a CFO to the company. I think it's a great example of a finance sort of backed process that can be a way for a CFO to actually sort of show the enterprise what we're capable of. Just like you, I'm paranoid about numbers. I'm paranoid about security and controls. The reason we did what we did, we went on a journey with Deloitte to do this, is we actually built it on premise on our own architecture, which we call PCAI, Private Cloud AI. So it's completely running on our gear downstairs at the bottom of literally the bottom of our office. So I don't have to worry. I was able to sort of go to sleep at night. I partnered with an accounting firm for exactly all the reasons you said. I'm terribly scared about compliance. So I knew they had my back and we worked together. And then we came across some amazing challenges, which I see Anthropic has sort of figured out already, which was the concept of determinism. One of the, as we've gone through these sort of evolutions of large language models, what we learned was, determinism is a real problem with financial data. If you ask a model a question, the model actually needs to give you the same answer if you're asking financial data. So we work with NVIDIA to actually crack the NIM on determinism. So we're here today. I did happen to read this week that Anthropic can apparently do all of that. That's been about my team's been a year developing. But I think it just highlights the pace and speed of AI. And I suppose I'm grateful. I look back and I said to my husband this week, I'm so glad I pushed my team for a year to do this, because the world is going to go so fast. And I think you're seeing in the markets what's happened with a lot of software companies. I was talking to the CFO of a very large software company yesterday who was shocked and demised over, the sort of reaction that's going on in the market, that literally software will become irrelevant very quickly with AI. So with that, I'll leave it there, but I must admit, super excited about Alfred, and we'll see where it takes us from here.
Thank you, Marie. Admiral Fears, you bring a unique perspective to this panel. As leader of the Joint Interagency Task Force South, your team developed machine learning tools, big data analytics to intercept over 300 tons of cocaine. That's not a position any of us have ever come close to. Now you advise the Chertoff Group on AI security, and are engaged with other activities as well. So tell us a little bit about your perspective on how, from your perspective in national security, how AI is developing in the corporate world, and whether you see it developing quickly enough, or do people have the right controls in place?
Yes, I'm really happy to be here with you guys today, and every finance panel deserves, some sort of an old ship captain to round it out. But what I would tell you generally is we're all racing in this direction of employment of AI, right? And so Anoop mentioned something in his opening remarks, and you just touched on it as well, Marie, with this idea of probabilistic versus deterministic modeling. And so just so you don't have to think too deeply about this, let me just say, probabilistic modeling, if all the data, your data online says 60% of it says the sky is blue and 40% of it says the sky is green. When you ask a large language model, which is set up to be probabilistic, 60% of the time it's going to tell you the sky is blue. 40% of the time it's going to tell you the sky is green. So what is that? It's called a hallucination. And we talk about this a lot with the application of large language models in particular. When you have a deterministic outcome, as you very directly stated, every time you ask it a question, you get the same answer. With the same input, you get a predictable and reliable output. So in the world of finance, where audit is one of the cornerstones, you've got to have the kind of confidence that one can have using deterministic modeling. And so one of the things that I would distinguish when we talk generally about AI, is there are large language models and there are small language models. And so when you have a small language model, you might be able to curate your data a little differently. And then you design a small language model for your use case, and you can set up AI agents on top of those. And so these are important concepts to get when you're employing artificial intelligence. And I'll cite two studies for you, academic studies, since I'm in an academic environment here. The first one, and you can Google these, the first one's titled ChatGPT is Bullshit. And there's a Princeton professor who defined the word bullshit in academic terms, right? And so the idea is a simple one. Be careful what you ask of a large language model, because you might not get a precise answer or one that you're looking for. There's another study that was done cooperatively between an NVIDIA engineer and a professor down at Georgia Tech. And that study is titled Small Language Models and Agentic AI is the Future, right? And so when you contemplate what your use case is, when you contemplate what kind of integrity your artificial intelligence outcome requires, then you can design those use cases using the proper tools. And so I'm not saying that large language models are bad, but if I've got a ball-peen hammer and a 25-pound sledgehammer, I want to take the right tool out for the job. And so LLMs are always going to have a place, but pay attention to small language models and agentic AI, because I think they're going to have a very specific purpose when you want to be able to reduce the amount of hallucination that your AI outcome gives you.
Thank you, Admiral. Marie, I know you have an interest in small language models as well. I think that you're also an advocate for them in some contexts. Can you elaborate? Can you tell us your perspective?
Sure. Well, I couldn't agree more with what you said. I actually am a big sort of advocate for small language models, because I think, to your point, you curate the data and you can build for bespoke use cases. And I'm going to talk about one, and Kathleen's in the audience here today. So a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, I had coffee with Kathleen over here from Rice as well. And we were sitting in Pondicherry, and I told her about, hey, I have taken on a new job as the CFO of HPE. We've got some work to do on our investors and investor relations. What I'd like to do, and I started thinking about this concept, I must be able to, every quarter my team tries to predict the questions the analysts are going to ask. And it's a human-led process. My team comes up with about 50 questions. We typically get about 10 on the call. I spend my damn weekend, but it's hard to believe at this age I'm still studying stuff, but I am studying every weekend to parrot off these questions. I said to her, there's got to be a better way to do it. I know all of these analysts. I've worked with them for years. You know their personalities. There must be a way to predict what they're going to ask. And so we started chatting about, is it possible to use, like you said, an SLM with data that we know is available in the market, analyst questions, scripts, etc., to help anticipate better questions, and also to help, when I speak on the street, get the language right. And so we started working together, collaborating to build what we call a DARE, which, for those of you who may not know, is a very famous woman who was in this space, who was an early machine learning. So we kind of have Alfred, starts with the A, and we have a DARE, the woman. So we have the male and the female AI agents at HPE. But I think it's a great example of where we use much more curated data sets, to your point, and it's really focused around specific sort of workflows. And so this is, the way I look at AI for my team and for the company is that you need to look at the strategic layer where you can use LLMs productively, SLMs, like you said, for those sort of really those use cases where you're going to need curated data that's relevant to you, relevant to your organization, because an LLM is not going to help me in that regard. And then, I love my agents, because I spent so many years with bots. I think that there's just an enormous place for agents with the right controls to do a lot of that sort of repetitive analysis that, frankly, analysts today could spend better time doing more productive work that's actually insightful, and use the human in the loop with the agents. So a couple of examples there, and I think there's probably many more use cases in finance that we'll continue to find like this.
Thank you. Marie, you said something earlier that intrigued me, which is that Anthropic has the ability to do what your team spent a long time developing.
I know.
So there's an MIT
Oh,
study,
yeah.
I'm sorry, there's an MIT study that came out a while back that said only 5% of AI pilots make it to production. My suspicion about that is that a lot of them didn't make it to production because the big three players developed those skills in the LLM already, and that whatever the company had been developing was no longer a contribution. So I would ask all of you, should people be building their own tools to get around the limitations of the current models, or should we just wait a few months and see if the current models
I felt
improve?
bad this week. I got to tell you, I had a gut punch, when I read what they did with the P&L. I was like, oh my God. I mean, literally my team, we were on version 63. I mean, I can't tell you how hard this was. It's difficult. Like the amount of iteration you got to go through. You need a team that has backbone like no tomorrow. I have another team, their backbone cratered. They couldn't handle it. They just like petered out. But I saw what Anthropic did and I was like, wow. I mean, I suppose it's still a question, does it work? I mean, they sort of said it works, but I think one of the things I've learned over my career is at the end of the day, it's all good on paper, but you really got to make it work in the enterprise. And the more RPA and AI I've done, the more I believe that the human is actually the biggest sort of part of change. So if you don't get management of change right, you don't get the workflow redesigned right, you don't get people to accept the change, then all of this good AI ain't going to work anyway. But that's a simplistic view.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think it was a British statistician that said all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? And so this idea that we're talking about large language models and small language models, and your question really is, should we wait? My view is no. You just have to lean into it and iterate as you do with any kind of a technology provider or a technology platform. You've got to be able to iterate to get to your desired outcome. And so hopefully this just keeps getting better and better and better, but it's never going to be perfect.
Let's talk about Agentic. So if we can, let's turn the conversation to Agentic AI that takes actions instead of just providing information. What control problems does that bring up, and how do you manage that in the financial function?
That's a great question. So I think I'm just going to wait 2 months and I'll be caught up with her, Exactly, not even 2 months. No, I think that's the ultimate question, right? It's like you want to be able to put in your data and you want to have, I guess, deterministic answers, right? Something that's not going to hallucinate on you, right? And I guess the other key thing is like the data you put in needs to be accurate to begin with, right? So I think we've collected, so much data over the time, running 2,000 stores, there's so much data. Now, is it an accurate data? Is it something that we need to put in there? So I think, we got to look at it that front. Hey, what we put in, it's not going to spit out anything accurate, right? So there's controls on what's coming in, and then I guess the ultimate control is, hey, am I going to trust what's coming out, right? So that's kind of where I think as a company, we're still just trying to figure that out, right? And I'm going to wait 2 more months, and we'll see where I sit.
I was an ex-auditor myself, so I have to say there is a lot of control issues that need to be sort of managed very carefully. Certainly, I've done a lot of work on bots and controls, and so you really have to understand where in the company those bots are working. You need to have tightly controlled sort of processes. It also has to be part of your audit regime. So most large public companies have to go through audits. And so today, I would say we've got a pretty good process for managing through bots, the piece that I'd say is still early days, that is really how AI is integrated into the control fabric of a company. But I don't see it being particularly different to bots. We have a whole lot of sort of layers of approvals and hierarchies that need to be in place. And so what I've done with the AI is I've used that same hierarchy that we've had for bots, so that way we had a fairly common sort of place to build the framework to manage the controls environment. It's something I think about a lot. I mean, the last thing I would need is AI running wild or bots running wild. So we've been very deliberate and very conscious right from the get-go of building how we were, letting this work its way through the architecture. I would say that I am worried about is agentic AI and how all of these agents are going to actually operate inside the company. I'm not smart enough to know today how an agent working in finance is going to communicate with an agent in supply chain. I know that many of the companies think that this is a novel idea, but having the background I have, I just can't mentally yet get to a point where I can see how these agents are going to work together across an enterprise. I can see them working sort of across specific functions with bookends, but I am sort of a little bit scared of an agent running wild from finance over to marketing. So that piece I don't understand yet.
Yeah. So as it relates to agents, you need to measure the performance of the agent. Like, what's its purpose? How did you define it? And then you continue to adjust the model. And so you need to you need to have an ability to quantitatively score the performance of your model to have the agent do the thing that you've asked it to do. And so, for example, what we do in our company is when we design a new agent, that agent is deployed in a sandbox, and we measure its performance in a controlled environment before we let it loose. And your point about how the multidisciplinary agents interact with each other, my mind goes to build a bigger sandbox and figure out what the things are that, whether it's finance and supply chain or what the different performance criteria are. But being crystal clear about what you want as an outcome is super important. And then you can iterate your way to squeeze all the hallucination out of a model's performance so that you get a reliability score. Instead of my example of blue sky, green sky, 60%, 40%, you want a model's performance to get up in the upper 90s of a percentage. And if it's something that's an auditable function, for example, whether it's in finance or something else, you can continue to refine that model to get you as close to 100% as humanly possible.
Thank you. Let's turn to the labor market, if we could. So, Andrew, what skills or talents would you be looking for now in finance hires compared to 5 years ago?
Yeah, I had this question last night, so I've been thinking on it. I was like, and I was going around and around. I think I wouldn't change what I'm looking for. I think what I've looked for at the beginning is somebody that thinks outside the box, right? I can get and I can create a nice pivot table and have Excel do that, right? But I can't find that person that will think outside the box and create the processes and think, hey, we have this issue. How do I fix it? And coming from an audit background, that was very important, right? It's like, hey, I'm going into 20 different companies a year and I'm auditing them. And could companies try to hide something? Yes. So you got to think about ways of how to find that, right? I'm not going in there intentionally trying to find fraud, but that is always in the back of your mind, right? So in my opinion, I'm not going to change my strategy on the type that I'm going to try to find, right? Now, I will have to change it on getting all the same resumes because ChatGPT has made them all similar. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But the person that I'm looking for, I think, is still the same.
Yeah, look, I would say building off that, today we're definitely hiring people that have an understanding of AI. I think it's not good enough just to have the sort of skills I had, for example, when I graduated. I think today, and I tell my kids, I have a teenage daughter about to start business at university, and I'm like, hey, if you don't understand AI, I'm not going to hire you. So either you figure it out or you'll be unemployable at the end of this degree. And I tell all her girlfriends, and she's, they've got they're all going off to university, very excited about there. And I tell them, hey guys, half the jobs you're going to go for won't exist. I got news for you. You better get some damn experience today doing something real, because a lot of the jobs that we did, the basic sort of very sort of mundane entry level jobs that were data entry, will go away. And some of the folks I speak with that are sort of fairly active in AI have stopped hiring a lot of really sort of entry level roles. So you can see that, and I think I got asked this question 7 or 8 years ago when I was the CFO of UiPath, will RPA eliminate jobs? And so the answer was, it changed the jobs. The jobs that it didn't, there wasn't a net zero reduction in employment, but what happened is you hired people that had complementary skills, new jobs evolved, and the market sort of leveled out. But I think with AI, you need to have the experience. I think going to university today and not getting that experience is, it's going to be a mistake.
I'm going to use one of our hires as an example, but we hired a professional horn player who happened to be also very well educated in policy and analysis and things like that. I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but it's a left brain, right brain sort of a function. And you need people that are creative, because your imagination is only one of the limitations that you have for how you do that. And so if you can put together a multidisciplinary team, and you've probably heard the expression, and we repeat this all the time at Magi, A's pick A's and B's pick C's, right? And this idea that A performance people want to surround themselves by people that are smarter than we are, right? And that B performance people don't want to be surrounded by people that are smarter than they are. They want to pick C's, right? And so A's pick A's, B's pick C's. But, we look for this sort of creativity, when it comes to writing code and designing agents and things like that. You need people that have degrees in applied mathematics and coding and all these other things. But at the end of the day, you want a creative team that can solve problems. Right. And so that imagination piece is really important to me.
Thank you. In terms of training your employees for today's world, Marie, you've got 3,000 finance professionals, and you've got a very structured, I think, system to develop their skills with gamified challenges and weekly reviews and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about that process and how it's worked?
Sure. We decided very early on that the best path was actually not just to hire all the people with the skills, but actually to reskill our organization and to give them access to modern tools. So we have built a very structured program for our finance professionals to really learn how to, first of all, build bots. I thought it was important to learn how to, build automation tools so that they could integrate that into their workflows. And then we sort of did, the 101 on what is AI. And then we have Copilot deployed throughout the organization. We have the Agentic version. So we've enabled the team and taught them how to build agents inside of Copilot. And then we spend, a lot of time just sort of gamifying it. And actually, we've built a rewards system. So, actually I have a message I send out every Monday. I highlight some of the stories and success. And then we give out, sort of quarterly announcements and quarterly prizes to different teams that have built awards, that have built projects that have gone well beyond their sort of normal course of business. And we found that was a great way to just create momentum and incentive in the organization for people to really lean in. I think moreover, we've sort of pitched the idea that today, we used to say a minor in AI, and now I say a major in AI. You really need to keep your skills fresh and modern, but you need to equip the folks with a host of tools. Now, some of those are personal productivity tools, and others are more developing an understanding of workflows and business process. But we've been very intentional about reskilling and education, and I believe that's probably one of the tools for success for all of us, just for life.
My own view is that a lot of the productivity gains are going to come from things bubbling up. People who are in the middle of the processes, if they understand what the AI tools can do, can figure out how to adapt their processes to be handled by AI. And it's good to hear that that's been a success story. Admiral Fears, you've said that people look for a silver bullet when they should be learning the basics. And Marie talks about going slow to go fast. And Andrew comes from audit, where getting it right matters more than getting it first, as he said. So overall, would you say that the finance profession is moving too fast or too slow on AI?
I guess I'm moving too slow. No. Man, that is a good one. Why didn't you give me that one last night? No. Too fast or too slow? I think it depends, right? I would say, look, I'm going speed on things that can really increase productivity, and being cautious on things that could, cripple, our presentation to AT&T, right? So that's kind of how I would say it in a very simple. So
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd say too fast or too slow. I think it's more FOMO, fear of missing out, which is if you don't get started, I think there's a price tag to not having the skills and capability. And I look back and, like I said, I was really proud this week. We presented to our CEO and all the executive team, Alfred, and you could see the team, their eyes just fell off the chair. They're like, shit, this team did this quietly for a year and boom, all that work's just gone away. And I thought to myself, if we hadn't gone through that journey and gotten to version 63, we wouldn't be where we're at, where I now have a team that understands how to do this. Just going through that journey took a long time. Now, like I said, I got the gut punch when I saw Anthropic came out and basically was able to do everything I'd done in a year and a few hours. But I still think that taking the team through that journey is going to mean the next thing we tackle, we're going to go really fast. And I thought to myself, gosh, for the people who haven't done anything, good luck.
Yeah, and so this is a window for me to inject a nautical metaphor, right? So I grew up driving ships, and I learned how to do celestial navigation when I was a young man. And I could navigate a ship anywhere in the world by looking up in the sky and determining what my position is. And satellite navigation came along, global positioning system came along, all these automated systems then came along. And so by the time I was a ship captain, I was training junior officers how to drive a ship the old way, right? And so I think the point here is that you still need to know what the black box is doing, and you still need to have an understanding. And so even though you got to version 63, your team is that much smarter about what it is you're trying to accomplish, rather than somebody that picks the black box off the shelf and says, input, output, I'm not sure how that happened, right? And so when you're driving a ship and the black box spits out erroneous information, you need to be able to discern that, it's giving you something that's incomplete. And so AI in that sense, in my mind, is not a fire and forget sort of a solution. You need people that are that have their sleeves rolled up. You quoted me on the silver bullet thing, and I'm reminded one of my influences as an author is C.S. Lewis, a Christian and a moralist. But he delivered a speech to the King's College called "The Inner Ring" back in 1948, I think. And he cautioned people against trying to get in the inner ring and instead to become a sound craftsman, because by becoming a sound craftsman, you find yourself in an inner ring with other sound craftsmen. And so the point in this context is you've got to be a sound craftsman. You've got to be in the environment where you're creating these solutions so that you can automate things that, to the point of a finance committee, would be auditable, right? And that you've got that kind of confidence.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to throw it open to questions from the audience. I'm sure that there's lots of questions for this wonderful panel. Michael, you're picking. You're going to hand out mics, or
we're gonna go left to right, try to get balanced approach this time. There we go.
Hi, my name is Melissa Bartimo, and my question is pursuant to the Admiral's comment about knowing what the black box is doing. Following up on the elimination of entry-level positions, a lot of our interns and entry-level positions are going by the wayside, but that is where you learn the things that you need to know before you become a senior, a manager, things like that. So how are we going to address that knowledge gap when our high school and college students are using AI to do their homework for them and don't understand the critical thinking to actually be able to check what the AI spits out? I worry we're going to have us older folks who have the knowledge and can check it, and the younger folks who just know what AI tells them.
I think about that every single day of my life. I think it's the big challenge, and I frankly think it's a responsibility of people like all of us to make sure that does not happen. It's a real risk of AI that people sort of look at their workforce, and look, there's a lot of companies out there are making very bold statements about how AI is really changing their workforces, and I think a lot of it is not exactly 100% correct. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that there are roles that enable the folks to really develop those skills. I see it with my eldest daughter. She's 18. She's doing internships. To your point, those entry-level roles give you the window into advanced learning so that you can be, just like C.S. Lewis, a master of the craft. Because it's one thing for somebody to build an LLM that does everything apparently that you do, but really what they don't understand are the nuances that go on in different companies and organizations. So I think it's a responsibility for us to, as I do feel very much about the ethical responsibility of AI, I think it's incumbent upon us who have the ability to make that influence to really ensure that those roles are there. I don't think I have an easy answer for you, unfortunately, but I do think companies, organizations need to create space to hire people, and it's something that I do. In fact, I just recently have Ashley here today, who's my chief of staff, who's hiring a group of graduates, and I told her we need to do 2 or 3 cohorts a year, because it's those young people that are going to drive and learn and drive the change as well. They are actually some of the fastest learners in companies. So I think you need to look at it as a change agent role too.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, as a father of 2 young men, I think any of us that have children, you kind of guard against the same sort of challenge. You want your kids to be able to do these things for themselves and not to cheat using AI and to do these sorts of things. But I think institutionally, we just have to rethink how our training programs perform so that you're bringing people in and they get behind the curtain of the black box as part of what you're doing to train them up so that when they're in mid-level or high-level positions, they're quite competent and comfortable with performing in that system.